Hi. It is almost laughable to hear some of the things that people believe about the process of buying and selling real estate and how to conduct a transaction here in the DMV and in the Montgomery County area. It's funny because there's a lot of miscommunication, misinformation. The media spreads it all over the place. And so when people start with the process of buying a house, particularly people who haven't done it before, but even those veterans are filled with ideas and considerations and quote unquote facts that just don't apply. Maybe they did once, but they certainly don't now. So I am going to bust a few myths here with this next little bit of time. And I want you to pay attention. Each of these could be a topic in and of itself, could spend a lot of time on each one of them, but I'm going to touch on about 10 of them here to give you the real deal on some of these things so you could be a smarter buyer, a more educated seller, and know your way around the transaction better. The first thing is that the seller has to fix things after the inspection. Totally not true. Anything that comes up in an inspection is generally negotiable as long as you've got the proper contingencies built into your contract. But nobody's obligated to fix anything. Basically, a real estate transaction around here is as is, except as how you've modified it to give yourself the right to do an inspection, potentially the right to negotiate things or even walk away from the transaction if you find things that you don't like. I usually tell people to make a reasonable request, and if the seller is realistic, he'll entertain that reasonable request. But nothing's guaranteed. I've had properties on the market and I've seen buyers come with their 50, 60, 70-page inspection reports and they asked, just fix what's wrong. Yeah, that doesn't happen. And all it does is upset the seller and add a lot of animosity to the transaction. You do, if you've included an inspection contingency in your offer, you would have the right to negotiate, you'd have the right to void. But when it comes right down to it, no seller is obligated to fix anything that you find wrong with that house that you're inspecting as part of your transaction. An appraisal is a different story. There are sometimes things that the seller is obligated to take care of, and certain types of financing have things built into them where there is no choice. But by and large, you do an inspection, seller's not obligated to fix anything at all. And you should take a close look at what you really think you need and really what you want before you move forward with that. Another big myth is that the earnest money deposit, the size of it, that is, doesn't matter. Again, not true. Deposits in the DMV, Montgomery County, DC, and even many parts of Virginia tend to be on the higher side. They're considered to be skin in the game. In the old days, you might have gotten away with $500 or $1,000 as a deposit in good faith for the transaction. But in these times, 500, 1,000, even $5,000 is a sum that a buyer could leave on the table and walk away if the transaction got rough or the things that they just couldn't do or just decided to change their minds. So the seller wants to see, and the seller's agent's going to advocate that they look for a larger deposit. It's skin in the game. It prevents walking. I had a condo that I sold a couple of years ago in Reston, and we lost out on a bid before we made the sale to a buyer whose terms were almost identical to us, but they took the deposit, which was substantially higher than ours and substantially higher than you'd normally see. But the deposit became the issue. And so the deal was actually consummated based on the earnest money deposit as much as any of the other terms. Here's another one. You can always renegotiate the price after the appraisal is done. Well, if you've built into your offer and your contract an appraisal contingency, you will have the right to go back to the seller and make that request. However, the seller is not obligated. It is becoming more and more common where the buyer and the seller split the difference between the appraisal and the contract price if that happens. And in some cases, I've seen sellers outright refuse. And depending on market conditions, you may have to eat it. And if you don't have your financing set to accommodate that, you could be in serious trouble. But no seller is obligated to do anything. All right, here's one of my favorites. Properties in this area always appreciate. Now, we're in a pretty good area with regards to the real estate markets. And generally speaking, over time, most real estate in this area does appreciate. But If you look at graphs of any appreciation over a long period of time, you'll see that they're not straight lines. There are ups, there are downs. We're currently in a situation and in a market here in the beginning parts of 2026 where it's flattened off a bit. So you aren't going to see the appreciation that you saw uh, during the pandemic. So that by itself should tell you that appreciation is not a straight line. The other thing you really need to realize is that the land, the location itself, will tend to appreciate, whereas the structure itself actually tends to depreciate. As it gets older, the systems wear out, the finishes are not as up to date, and there's maintenance that needs to be done and sometimes is ignored. So the structure itself can actually depreciate while the land and the location that the property sits on is actually going up. You got to keep in mind that the structure itself tends to wear out. It's a physical universe thing that is subject to wear and tear and forces of nature and all of those things. So over time, it does tend to wear out and become less valuable unless it's kept up, unless it's improved, and unless it's replaced. One I've heard a lot about over the last bunch of years, and that is that staging a home to get it on the market is a waste of money. Staging now has become more and more the norm than an option. The old saying of you can't judge a book by its cover is pretty true. However, when it comes to real estate and houses, people still tend to do that. They look at them online. How pretty is it from the pictures on Zillow and Redfin? That's what they're gauging, and that's where they're deciding whether to come see your house in the first place. So, if it's staged and it looks good online and then it meets their expectations when they arrive, that staging is way more an investment than an expense when it comes down to pricing and getting a return on your property when you sell it. Some people go along with the idea that building a new house is the way to go. Now, one good thing about buying new is you get what you want. You can pick out your finishes, you can pick out the style of the house, you can pick out lots of things. But it is by no means an inexpensive way to go. And in many cases, and in most cases, when you buy a new build, when you buy a new house that's brand new, it begins to depreciate much like a new car does when you drive it off the lot. So if you get into a situation where you've bought a new house and have to move earlier than you expected, you might find that you're going to lose a little bit of money in the process. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Not saying you shouldn't buy a new home, but keep in mind there are downsides. There are also hidden costs that aren't really talked about in many cases up front, so you have to watch for that. You are buying at a premium price, and it's seldom cheaper to buy a new house than it is something comparable, if you can find it, that's a resale. Also, the finishes and the appliances and the utilities in the home are often builder grade, so they may not last as long as what you would have picked if you were actually making the choices directly. And the upfront costs are often higher too. So while buying a new home that's freshly built can give you more of what you want, it comes at a price, and you need to realize that. And that price can be short term as well as long term. I hear this one a lot. You want to know, if I invest X number of dollars, what will my return be when I sell the house? Impossible to say. There are lots of factors that play when you're discussing this. It is important to upgrade a house if it needs upgrading before you put it on the market. And in many cases, you can get back what you invested and sometimes even more, but that's not going to be guaranteed. There are a lot of things at play here. The market conditions in the first place, what you in fact did. Some of the things that you might invest and put into a house before putting on the market have no bearing at all on the ultimate sale price you're going to get. Put a new furnace in, you might spend $10,000 to $20,000 on that, but that may not get you a nickel more for the house when you sell it. Same thing goes for a roof. These are all important things that might save you money during the inspection process, but by and large, they're not going to get you any sort of return on the price. Upgrade the kitchen if it needs it, if it's been out of date, and especially something that's 20 years old or older, and you put that money into a kitchen, you might get it back. But it's not guaranteed either. It also is going to depend on what you upgraded it with. You have to be very mindful of the trends that people are buying in order to take advantage of those returns. And that's where an agent can help you and a stager can help you as well. Often kitchens and primary bathrooms are where you do get the biggest return. But just because you spend $50,000 on the kitchen or $30,000 on the primary bathroom, doesn't mean you're going to get those dollars back. It may shorten the time on the market. It may increase the competition for the property if it's desirable enough, but isn't necessarily going to get you the dollars back that you spent or even more than what you spent. Another thing too, when it comes to improvements, is you can improve part of the house and not the rest of it. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, wow, the main level looked awesome, but the upstairs was dreary, drab, so we're not gonna buy the house. If the whole house looked like the main level did, whatever the folks did to it, then it might have made a difference. So you have to be careful that you don't just focus too much on one area of the house and include other areas as well. Here's a good one. Online estimates are close enough. I tell you, I look at these things because I know that you as a consumer do, because I want to know what Zillow and Redfin and the others are saying about the value of houses that I'm going into. But I'll tell you, they vary widely. I can look at an estimate on Zillow. I can look at an estimate on Redfin. I can look at a dozen different automated valuation systems, and I can get values that are sometimes 50, 75, $100,000 different from each other. So they're all using algorithms. Nobody's seen the property. Nobody's seen what you've done to it. Nobody's seen the condition of it. Nobody's seen where it actually sits. It's all based on averages and general information for a given area. And they're all proprietary, so there's no way to know. But none of these things should be the basis for your list price or your purchase price in any event. This one I hear a lot from people who are coming into the area from some other part of the country. And that's price per square foot is the best pricing strategy. Now, this can apply if you're in a newer area and most of the homes are of similar size, similar layout, and similar style and similar finish. But by and large, the homes in this area are older, they've been modified, and built a long time ago and changed substantially since they were originally built. So pricing by square foot doesn't work around here. Some parts of Texas, some parts of Florida, I've seen it where it actually is how they base it. And it's in communities where the properties were all built around the same time. They're all the same sort of layouts and same sort of homes, and you can get away with it. But here, it just doesn't work. Only if you're getting into a cookie cutter neighborhood where there are 3 or 4 styles of house and they're all basically identical and they were all built within the last maybe 20 years, 15 years, something like that, where they're all still in similar condition. Otherwise, trying to price a house by square foot is just not workable and doesn't even come close. Here's one I'm hearing a lot about lately, especially with market conditions, what they've been. If you look long enough, you'll snag a deal on a home. Okay. Everybody wants to get the best deal they can when they're buying and when they're selling. Problem is, price low triggers competition. So guess what happens? You get that what looks like a great price and 10 people want to bid on it, and so it pushes the price up and generally pushes it up higher than it would have been if it had been priced properly. That benefits the seller, but it certainly doesn't benefit you as the buyer. What you want to do is look for value, not price. And you want to look for the longer term rather than the short run. If you stay in it long enough, that's when you're going to get the benefits of appreciation. And that's where the value can come from over time. Buy for the longer term, not the short. Look for value, not price. Don't try to get the bargain because everybody's looking for the bargain. Everybody's going towards the bargains, all the bargains will get pushed up into prices that people don't want to have. And that's what happened during the pandemic and other times when the market's been pretty brisk. So when you're buying or selling a house, don't run with the crowd. The crowd doesn't know what they're talking about. Don't listen to the media. Don't listen to Aunt Nellie. Don't listen to Uncle Tom. Take a look with your own eyes what's going on in the market. Listen to your agent. He's on the ground running. He can help you make decisions better than anybody else can. And don't fall for these myths. They're just false. They're just not true. And nobody ever gets a house leaning on these things as crutches. At any rate, I look forward to seeing you again. Enjoy your transaction. Buy the best house you can. And I'll see you soon.